Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to WJMS Media. I am your girl Jams, your host for this evening. I'm very excited to be bringing you guys this sort of one-of-a-kind broadcast. We're definitely doing a roundtable discussion this evening, but it's a conversation that is long overdue for those folks that are WJMS radio media OG fans. You'll remember that we lost our own Tommy Flame last year in August to gun violence. And this is a conversation that I've been meaning to have for a while. I needed to gather up the strength and, the emotional stability to have this conversation and know that I could have this talk without bursting into sudden tears. And so I wanted to make sure that I was good for the conversation before we had it. And so it's been about a year and some change now that he's been gone. We miss him terribly. And I wanted to have this conversation in memory of him and also just in remembrance and sort of an acknowledgement of a life that was lost that really didn't need to be lost. So tonight's conversation is going to be about gun violence, not just in Philadelphia, but kind of around the country. And what are some of the realistic ways that we can, I don't want to say stop it because I don't know that it'll ever stop, but what are the realistic ways that we can start to taper it back a little bit and start to take control back? And maybe some of the resources that are available in the community for both victims of gun violence and before children turn to the streets, resources to help them find better avenues and better outlets than violence. And so this evening, I'm going to have a few folks joining me. I'm really, really excited to have these people on air with me. They are folks that I believe are figureheads in the gun violence sort of sphere and realm. And I thought that it would be a wonderful and insightful conversation to have them tonight. So I'm going to bring them on air and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, give you guys a little bit of background on who they are. There may be one or two extras joining us, so don't be alarmed if another face pops in on the screen. But for now, we are definitely going to have a wonderful, wonderful conversation with the other two individuals on the screen tonight. So I bring to you Kevin Beckford of Don't Shoot Guns, Shoot Cameras, and Melanie Nelson from Philadelphia as well. And we are going to have a really, really good conversation. So, but we got one more person who's joining. But in the meantime, Kevin, why don't you go ahead and give your introduction and background, let everybody know what you're currently doing and, how you got involved with the organization that you're with.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, Jamie, thank you so much for the invitation. Peace and blessings all. I'm so excited and honored to be having this conversation. My name is Kevin Beckford. I am the co-founder of the Hustlers Guild. We are a capacity building organization that orients to build opportunities, workforce development, and learning opportunities for Black and Brown youth using Black culture and hip hop as a lever. I'll come to this organization and specifically one of our initiatives, Don't Shoot Guns, Shoot Cameras, first as a first generation high school graduate, college graduate. By proxy of a number of interventions, the trajectory of my life had changed, to which I was able to become a teacher. I taught in Philadelphia for 3 years before working in government. Worked at the White House under the Obama administration, which is where I met my two co-founders. We've been on this mission to essentially address a number of ailments and problems in society using a wraparound holistic approach to which Don't Shoot Guns, Shoot Cameras had arisen. We actually work in partnership with a number of partners and organizations, Red Grant, comedian, and activists. We work closely with him, supporting him in this effort, as well as a number of other community organizations in DC and Los Angeles. So I'm excited to have this conversation, share a little bit more about what we do as an organization and how we tackle this issue of gun violence in our communities.
Absolutely. And welcome. And I'm really glad to have you on. Just based on everything you just said, I can already tell that you're going to bring a ton to this conversation. So I'm going to pass it over to Melanie Nelson now to introduce herself, her background, and how she got involved with her organization.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And thank you so much for having me. So I am Melanie Nelson, and I actually started in the victim services world when I was in high school. My mother was the previous executive director for Northwest Victim Services, and I would volunteer with her when I was in high school. My mother became a volunteer, sat on the board, became the board president and the executive director. I did the same thing, wasn't planned. So in 2024, I became the executive director for Northwest Victim Services in Philly. And in the Northwest, we worked with the 5th, 14th, 35th, and 39th police districts. So I did that for 7 years and 7 months, working with victims and co-homicide survivors, all victims of crime. I understood the importance of not being desk bound. So everyone had my cell phone number. They can call me Christmas, Thanksgiving, did not matter the day or the time or the hour. I understood that if a victim was in need, it was an emergency. In February 1st of 2022, I was asked to join the district attorney's office. So I am the director of the CARES unit. This unit is very unique, in which we are, and when I say we, I don't ask my responders to do anything that I would not do. So we are deployed to actual crime scenes.
Oh, wow.
And hospitals immediately after a homicide. So we are on the scene when those family members, those friends and community members just learn that their loved one has lost a life. So we're on that scene. And the same thing at the hospital when the doctors are delivering those death notifications. We are there with the next of kin, again, with community members, friends, and other family members. And we're offering crisis support at that time. So for me, providing services to victims and co-homicide survivors is not a job. It is a passion. It is something that I love to do, and I will serve until the day I die.
Absolutely. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I love the history behind your mom and everything that you guys did and followed in each other's footsteps. That's really good.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to turn it over to Giselle, who just joined us as well. So Giselle, welcome to the show, and give the audience a little bit of background on yourself and how you got involved with your organization.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here with you all. Well, my name is Giselle Merck. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. I have 3 young adults, 2 daughters and 1 son. I got involved with Moms Demand Action because my one and only son, JC, was murdered July 19th, 2017 in a robbery. And this was due to gun violence. So I'm in so many clubs, one being mothers of murdered sons and daughters, as well as parents of murdered children, and several others. But what made me become involved in Moms Demand Action is the focus on legislation and to make a difference, to make an impact. And Moms Demand Action, which is the grassroots of Every Town for Gun Safety, where I'm also Every Town Survivor Fellow. It gives me the space to heal as well as help other people heal, and to make sure that gun violence, that there's an end to it. This is a movement. It's not a moment. The moment is when my son's life was taken. The movement is, you did that, you're not doing, it stops here. It stops here. Every day we're hearing about more and more individuals being shot. Now, keep in mind though, with Moms Demand Action, it's not just for survivors of gun violence. We have survivors, yes, that have been injured. We have survivors whose loved ones have been taken. And then we have people who gun violence didn't affect them, but they've had enough. They have had enough. So they stand with people like myself to make sure it doesn't happen to somebody else. And Absolutely. It keeps happening. So we have to make a change.
We do. And before we get deep into the conversation, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of, or a few statistics, that there is current as I could find for right now, unfortunately. But as of July of this year, there were 300 mass shootings in this country. As of July, that was 5 months ago, 4 months ago. So we can only imagine what the number is at right now. I'm actually kind of scared to know what that number might be at 5 months later. And in 2020, which is the most recent year for some of this data, unfortunately, there was 45,222 people that died from gun-related injuries in the United States, which was by far the most on record. It was a 14% increase from the year before and a 25% increase from 5 years before that, and 43% increase from a decade prior. So our numbers are trending up in terms of gun violence. And honestly, the scary part is that the amount of people who purchased guns or got guns or found a way to get guns in the year 2020 was about 43 million people. And I don't know where that came from or why. There's conversation to be had around the pandemic and people feeling, the effects of the pandemic, the concept of the capital surge, everything that has happened over the last 2 to 3 years or so has really just sparked this increase in people deciding to have guns and get guns. And the conversation that I want to have with you guys tonight is everyone talks about, gun legislation and how we fix it and how we do this and how we do that. But a lot of it is just they're talking out both sides of their mouths. You know what I mean? And I want to have a real conversation with you folks to really discuss, like, realistically, how do we do this as a community in whatever community we may be in? And you guys are representing 3 totally different locations, which is wonderful. Me, myself, and another one. So that's 4 altogether. But, realistically, what does this look like and how do we do this? And then also, I want to give you guys the opportunity to talk about your organizations and the programs that you guys have that help victims or, help students and young folks stay off the street and stay away from the life that could lead them towards gun violence. So that's kind of where I wanted to go with the conversation tonight. But, obviously, first and foremost, you guys are wonderful in the things that you're doing. And, Giselle, I'm sorry for your loss. I feel that. I absolutely feel your pain in definitely not as a mom who lost a child, but as a friend who lost somebody very, very close to them. And a dear, dear friend of the media company here that we're on. Tommy was my co-host for We Out Here Radio and probably my number one fan, if I'm being honest with myself. He is somebody that had seen the beginning of this from a radio station to where we are today. And Melanie, you've been around since WJMS radio days. So Tommy has been around from the beginning of that and was the biggest supporter I had and was riding for me. You know what I mean? And with my diagnosis, I actually was tapping him to take over WJMS if anything should happen to me. And so, he was somebody very important in my life and very important to me. And I know how it feels to lose somebody senselessly to gun violence for no reason. It's stupid. And it makes you angry to your core. And I feel your pain, Giselle, when you said it stops here, it ends here, And so my first question to you guys tonight is really just, what are some of the ways that you yourself have been, intervening in different ways? Have you found anybody and intervened with them personally? Have you spoken to somebody who was maybe, heading down a bad path, or, just have you had any interactions with folks that you've been able to pull them back and turn them the right way? And I'm not going to pick on anybody. I'll let you guys kind of speak up in your own time, but I just want to see if you guys have had any of those experiences yet that you can share with the audience.
I'll start. I will say this. I think we're in a time where things have changed dramatically with our young people. And speaking to some high school students, and I won't say what high school it is, and I asked them, have you been affected by gun violence? More than half the class will raise their hand. That's alarming. And we're talking about babies. And they say to me, Miss Nelson, you either going to be the predator or the prey. That's sad. Another sad thing, they do not expect to live long.
Yeah.
Which is extremely, extremely sad. So I often say to myself, and I often say to people when we're sitting around those meetings and we're having the same meeting with the people we're preaching to the choir, and we really don't have the people in the meeting that need to be in the meeting to make a change? Are we asking these young people, what do you need? Are we asking these young people, tell me what's going on with you and what the problem is? Because something has changed over the years with these young people as to why you feel the need to shoot somebody 15 to 20 times. Why you feel the need to shoot somebody multiple times in their face. I was just talking about this today. This is what's going on in Philly. They're shooting them multiple times, and they're shooting them multiple times in their face. What does that say? It's just alarming. But we need to love on these young people. But most importantly, we need to ask them the very important question, what's going on in your life and how can I help you?
Absolutely. Giselle, Kevin, how about you guys? Any similar experiences where you've, intervened or spoken with young folks who are heading down paths of destruction?
So happy to speak. I really, what something that Melanie just shared, it really resonated. And it's with me personally. And it's the idea of not living to see a certain age. For whatever reason, when I was a kid, coming up from Camden, New Jersey, lived around Philly, South Jersey area, in some pretty rough neighborhoods. And 26 was always the number in my head. 26 was always the number in my head. So much so that when I saw my 27th birthday, I thank God. I had a true in the moment experience of I actually made it. And that isn't to say that there weren't by that point, I had gone to college, the trajectory of my life had completely changed. I had been very fortunate to have a variety of experiences, but that number 26 was still in my head. And I think the reality is for many young people coming up, particularly this generation, right, is that there is a number in your head. There is a number in many of our young people's head that I may not see this past this certain year. And that number is informed by some immediate realities, right, of violence, of an intimacy with gun violence, knowing people who may have passed to gun violence. But it's also beyond that, right? Gun violence is a poverty issue. Gun violence is a access issue. Gun violence is an education issue, right? Many young people are aware that the circumstances to which are determining their now has limits to it, right? And so for many, not all, but for many, there is perhaps a sense of hopelessness or a sense of lack of option, right? It's either to the point Melanie raised, it's either, you are the predator or the prey, right? And so when we are thinking about this issue of gun violence, we have to ask ourselves, like, what is creating those conditions, right, to which young people have that in their mind. I would have similar conversations with young people when I was a teacher, around this predator or prey ideology, right? Or many of them, would come to class, and never forget one boy, a fifth grader, head down, was just zoned out. Talk to him, ask him what was wrong. His brother was murdered 2 days prior, and he's sitting at his classroom desk, right? Struggling to, as anybody would, as any human would, but he's in school, he's in class because, it's meals, and that's where he got his meals, right? And so we really got to, think about this issue of gun violence as multi-pronged, right? As being relating to a myriad of different factors and realities that young people and people today are living with.
I agree. And the part that really gets me about all of it is it's not like this is isolated where it's like, oh, keep them off the streets and they're safe. You're really not safe anywhere, if we're being honest. I mean, they're shooting up churches, they're shooting up schools, they're shooting up concerts. You are not safe anywhere. They're shooting just in the streets through windows of people. You know what I mean? So it's like you can't escape the violence. And so it almost feels like a hopeless cause. Like, all right, how do we fix this? You know what I mean? And it's a cause where you can fix it on one side and it shoots up on another side. You know what I mean? Like we fixed the school violence, but now they're not doing it in school and they're doing it in the street. We fixed the street violence, well, now they're doing it in gatherings where they're together in groups, you know? So it's a scary thing. And I honestly, you know, part of me is relieved that I'm not in school now at this age, because I would be like, how do you focus on your schoolwork? How do you think about math and science and social studies when you're like, at any moment, somebody could bust through this door with a gun and shoot up my classroom?
Yes. Yes.
How do you
Exactly.
focus?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. I mean, now, for me, dealing with the students, Moms Demand Action has a student demand action side where students can actually text 64433 and then the word students. And you ought to see the youth in action because it's their lives.
Yeah.
See, I'm an old person. I dropped the ball. But these youth, oh no, they're fired up. They're fighting for their very lives. They're not going to take anything from anybody.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they're learning how to speak to state legislature. They're learning how to testify. They're learning how to be an advocate and to stand up to bullies. And then at the same token, through Moms Demand Action, you know, and Everytown Survivor Fellow network, they're also getting the help that they need. Because, you know, we're mature. You know, we're supposed to be mature adults.
Yeah.
And imagine, you know, what we're going through. Now imagine what a teenager, a toddler, somebody in high school is going through. You know, the mental health, the struggles. You know, for me, JC's friends, I always look for a way for family and friends to heal. So his friends, they're involved because it's like, we see what happened to our buddy JC. We saw what happened to him.
Yep.
We see what's going on in the news and this and that. We see how it's affecting families, communities, you know, because being a survivor, you can call it a survivor, you can call it being a victim, you know, there are many words for it, but being one, everybody is one. Everybody, because there's not one person out here that doesn't know of somebody that's been shot, that hasn't had it either happen to themselves, the community, whatever. You know, so imagine people now with PTSD and whatnot.
Yep. Absolutely. And the fact is, it's like the 6 degrees of separation thing is a real thing, you know. And my only question, not my only question, but one of the main questions I have is like, how real does it need to get in these streets before something legitimately happens? You know what I mean? Before they make legislation and before they make changes. It's almost like, how many lives do we have to, like, why after Columbine was there not immediate gun legislation? How many little children have to get gunned down in a school before they're like, okay, that's enough? You know what I mean? Like, and there's been how many school shootings since then? Like Sandy Hook, Columbine, there's the, you know, colleges across the country. It's ridiculous. It's like, how many student lives do we need to lose before somebody cares enough to say, all right, enough is enough. Like, we've had enough of this. You know, churches are getting shot up, all kinds of things. Like, how many lives need to get lost before legislation is reflecting it? That's the scary part. And so my question to you guys, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, pardon me. I was just going to say it's almost become cultural. It's almost become we're almost at a point to which we are numb. Like we almost have the
No, we are
expectation.
at that point. It's not coming to a point. If we're
Is
numb.
we at the-
We're
right.
like, oh, another school shooting. Okay,
Cry
Exactly.
it
for a
doesn't
minute,
affect.
move on.
So my question for you guys is really, and I mean, it's a hard question to answer, but how do we get a seat at that table to where the legislation is getting made and the legislation is getting created to fix this problem? Like, what does that look like, and how do we get there?
Well, if I could just chime in for one little bit.
Yeah.
One of the things with Moms Demand Action, and I keep bringing that because it's amazing, amazing group of people. One of the things with Moms Demand Action is we just had a demand a seat. And demand a seat, that's exactly what we did. You know, in this political arena, there is a lot of gun sense candidates out there. There's a lot of them, you know. Um, Unfortunately, what hurts is, like you mentioned, all of these other school incidents. But notice, Uvalde was a game changer. Uvalde, what happened in Uvalde was a game changer. It wasn't what happened in Parkland. It wasn't what happened in Sandy Hook. No, it was what happened in Uvalde, Texas.
Yep.
That is when it was a game changer. I mean, what's nice is what President Biden signed into law just this, I think it was just this June, the bipartisan. That was nice. What do we need to do next? We need to ban assault weapons. What do you need to be having an AK-15 for?
Yeah.
What do you need to have that for?
Yeah, I said the same thing. I'm like, what average a regular American citizen needs an AK-47? What do you need an assault rifle for? You know what I mean? Like, if you're a collector, okay, cool, collect pictures or something. But like, you don't need a legitimate AR-15 hanging out in your house. Like, there's no good that can, like, what good comes from that? Nothing. And if you're like, oh, it's for hunting, nah, because that's inhumane hunting. You know what I mean? Like, you don't hunt with AK-47s and AR-15s. That's not how that works. Like, I don't hunt, but I'm pretty sure that that's not what you're supposed to do. Like, that's against the rules. So I am absolutely for that. I'm like, I don't understand why regular average modern day American need, that kind of arsenal. I don't see anybody needing that besides the army or the military, period. And it may be the police, but even the police, I'm a little like, you're supposed to be policing the people. Like, why are you carrying AK-47s and AR-15s? I don't know that I want that either. But, I definitely would support the military and them folks having that kind of military grade weapon, because that's, when you're at war, that's what it is. But like, I don't see regular American people, or any people, not just Americans, any people really needing assault rifles for everyday whatever, But does anybody else have an answer to the legislator question about how we get seat at the table, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so I'll first and foremost, Giselle, I just have to acknowledge you and Melanie, and the work that you're doing in your communities to address this issue of gun violence head on in the ways that y'all do. I was talking to Melanie behind the scenes, y'all. Not sure I asked me, but I was just like blown away by her spirit and by her conviction. And Giselle, I hear it in this conversation talking to you. So I just had to acknowledge y'all first and foremost. Having said that, I think we all have a role to play, as it pertains to bringing about legislative action that will address this issue, right? And so you don't necessarily have to be explicitly in the realm of gun violence interventionist efforts to make a difference, right? Gun violence is an education issue. It's a access issue. It's a policy issue. It's an education issue, right? And so My response to your question, Jamie, is essentially we all can play a role in pushing for progressive policy in whatever realm in which we are in, and that's what we should orient to doing, right? And so, when you have access to a high quality education, or when you aren't going to school hungry, right,
Mhm.
in the day, right, or when you are, a student whose mental health, wellness, and hygiene is accounted for, right, and is taken into consideration, right. The likelihood, for example, of you, you know, exchanging as the antagonist of a gun violent event is far, far, far less likely, right? And so I think a big part of it really orients to progressive policies in whatever ways in which we can orient. And then I would also say, similarly to what Giselle and Melanie are doing, as individuals, they're creating their own tables, right? And so a
Mhm.
part of it is, functioning within institutions and structures and the typical protocols. But you can, and to Giselle's point, a lot of students they're mad, they are upset with what's going on, and they're finding the ways in which they can to
Yep.
to rally and organize, around this issue. And so a part of it again is operating within your realm, I would say, and then also creating your own tables. Like, in community, there's so much you can do to address this issue of gun violence, the ways that you have access to. You can.
Absolutely. Giselle, one of the things you said earlier kind of struck me a little bit, and it's so counter to everything that we hear normally. And you talked about students learning how to testify, and that's just so counter to everything we hear because of this stop snitching culture and so on and so forth. And so, how is that program received within Moms or Students Demand Action and stuff like that? Like, how is it? Is it well attended, or what are the conversations that you guys are having to sort of maybe combat the stop snitching culture?
Well,
I know it's a loaded question.
it is, but I mean, I would really have to say, I know about the snitching part,
Yeah.
and I know about bullies,
Mm-hmm.
but we're now talking about people's lives. That's what it boils down to is I'm standing up for my right. I have a right to attend a movie. I have
Yeah.
a right to go to school.
Yep.
I have rights,
Yeah.
and that right is I'm in school as a student. They're in school to learn. They're in school to have a great time, a great experience. So when somebody tries to rob you of that, you don't think of it as snitching. You think of it as I'm standing up for myself. If I don't stand up for myself, who will? Who will? And one of the things that the students, in Demand Action and Moms Demand Action, one of the things that we learn is use your voice. Use your voice. Because, see, when something like this happens, you've got people where they can't find their voice.
Mm-hmm.
They they've lost their voice. But these students, they're not snitching. These students have found their voice and they're using it because your voice is your weapon. The tongue is mightier than the sword.
Yep. I love
And I
that.
and I want to touch on that a little bit. The
Sure.
snitching piece. Again, we're living in a time where things are different, and I love what Giselle just said. There are many people who are afraid to use their voice, whether it's children, you got senior citizens, you have just middle-aged adults because of the gun violence that's taken place around the world, because of the gun violence that's taken place in the city of Philadelphia. People are afraid to say if they saw something because it seems like we're living in a day and time where there's no regard for human life.
Yep.
So that's a real issue. A real issue. And even if you have to go to court to testify, even if we talk about the court system, you have the victim and the defendant in the same courtroom. The defendant's family is there, the defendant's friends are there, and sometimes they're released at the same time. So snitching is major. You know what I mean? And it's different from when we were coming up. You have people that are really afraid to say something because at the end of the day, are you going to be on my block? When they found out I was the one that called the police, this is real talk. This is real talk. People are afraid to say something because, again, there's no regard for human life. Now, I'm young, but I'm old. And you remember a day when women and children were off limits.
Yep.
That's no more.
Nope.
It's the targets.
That's
all
no
the
more.
times.
That's no more. When I tell you the game has changed, it has changed. People are afraid for their life. They're afraid for their safety.
Yep, they absolutely are. And I was getting ready to ask you about that, Melanie. In your line of work, the stop snitching culture is major when dealing with victims and, you know, the crime scenes and all that kind of stuff. Nobody wants to talk to you and tell you what they saw or what they witnessed. You know what I mean? And so it gets hard to bring justice and to make change and to, you know, create legislative things that actually work in our communities. Because a lot of the times, you know, they talk about, regulating the people who are getting guns. Okay, but that works for the people that are getting guns the legal way. We're talking about a lot of these guns that are being got illegally. You know, like nobody on the black market is like, oh, let me see your license for that. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how that works. And so there needs to be realistic legislation that grabs at that aspect of the gun owning population as well, because it's not just about the law abiding citizens who want to go and get, you know, the fancy guns for their collection. We're talking about, you know, little Susie and little Johnny who are living on the block and are like, I need protection for myself and for my family because of everything that's going on around me. And I'm going to get it not from the Walmart down the street. I'm going to get it from my cousin's friend who I know, you know, who can get me this gun with the serial number scratched off the side. Exactly. That's the kind of legislation that we need to look at and the kinds of changes that need to be made within our community, because that's where the most damage sometimes is coming from.
That's true. That's true. And we also need to look at, when we're dealing with victims and we're dealing with co-homicide survivors, we also need to look at, which is a major issue, relocation. What about that mother who watched her son get murdered right on her porch? But we can't relocate this mother because she wasn't a direct victim at that time. What about that domestic violence victim who has a stay away order or a protection from abuse order, and she's calling the police and that offender's right there? But she needs to be put up in a hotel immediately. And she may, or he may, lose their life because we can't relocate them for their safety. If you want me to say something, relocation is a major, major issue with victims and co-homicide survivors. And I've been fighting that fight for a very long time.
So you're saying some of the legislation or some of the issues that you run into in your organization or in your line of work is that they won't relocate family members of people who have, you know, been victims of homicide because they're not the actual people involved?
So let me clarify. So if you're a victim of a crime, we can file a claim. You can, the community-based agencies can file a claim for you. And that's under the Victims Compensation Program, which is a wonderful, wonderful program. Under this program, we can help those who have funeral expenses. Now they're reimbursed. It could be lost time from work, therapy, relocation. Through the Victims Compensation Program, you're reimbursed $1,000. If someone owns their home, that does nothing. And sometimes, to be truthful, I don't have $1,000 laying around. Yeah. So I can't, you know what I mean, pay someone if I'm going to go get an apartment $1,000. There are times and situations where the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office will get involved, but
Mhm.
it's requirements for that. And law enforcement has to get that ball rolling with that. So for immediate assistance for relocation, that's where the problem comes into play.
Yeah.
But again, with me helping victims and co-homicide survivors, this is not a job for me. So I utilize my resources. So I may call a ministry and say, listen, I have this mother, I have this young lady, I have this father, I have this young man that needs to be put up in a hotel immediately
Yep.
for their safety. So then I'm able to tap into that ministry, and that ministry will ensure that that victim or that co-homicide survivor is in a hotel. There are community-based agencies in Philadelphia where I can contact them and say, listen, this is an emergency situation. We need to put this person up until they can move. But it doesn't always happen that way. It doesn't always happen that quickly, like we need it to.
That's funny. I didn't know that was I didn't realize that was an obstacle that you guys had to deal with when dealing with this kind of stuff. It's funny, the common sense things that you think are common sense are not so common sense. Like it's like things that you think should just happen automatically don't,
and it doesn't.
apparently. Yeah.
And another major issue we have, and this is unfortunate, a lot of people don't have life insurance for their loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm helping these families, they don't have money to bury their loved one. Mm. And think about that family where their loved one was a Muslim.
Yep.
So they have to lay their loved one to rest in 3 days. So again, I'm reaching out to ministries to say, listen, I asked the family to raise as much money as they can, but can you help them close that small financial gap?
Yeah.
But they can file a claim through victims' compensation, but that money is reimbursable to where they can be reimbursed for up to $6,500 through the victims' compensation program. But again, I say reimburse
that money.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So there are many obstacles that we're dealing with in the victim services world, and all situations are not bad. But when we need that immediate assistance, that's what we need, immediate assistance.
Yeah. Absolutely. Kevin, I want to turn over to you real quick because we haven't talked much about the subset of, your organization, the Don't Shoot Guns, Shoot Cameras. I want to talk a little bit about that and what you guys are doing for youth in the community to try to keep them off the streets and give them some resources that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. So why don't you talk a little bit about that and maybe some of the obstacles and challenges that you're facing within that group?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So the orientation to Don't Shoot Guns, Shoot Cameras is one that is preventative, right? And so the idea to which we operate around is if you have access, if you have something to do, if you are tended to as a person, you are less likely to engage in gun violence. And so Don't Shoot Guns, Shoot Cameras came into iteration actually during COVID. So a number of young people, as y'all may recall, were really not engaged, right? What COVID really exposed was just like the lack of engagement that many of our schools and just a large society had with young people, and as a consequence, a lot were engaging in violence. That summer 2020 was a really violent summer in every urban community across this country, particularly in DC, and so. We came about to address that, right? And so the idea is every student gets a camera. They are trained on how to use that camera. They are trained on all of the facets and operations of filmmaking. They're paired with mentors. They work in community to create a project of their choice. And so in that film camps usually cost about $2,000-$3,000. So many of the young people we're working with don't have access to $2,000-$3,000 to do a film camp. Many of them don't even know that was a thing, and I didn't know that was a thing until we did it. So we did the camp. They worked on these projects that first summer, and they cultivated into them doing showcases, doing films on a number of different projects. One of the DC cohorts, they did theirs on gentrification and the change in dynamics that were like directly related, right, to these realities of displacement and consequent poverty and gun violence and things of that nature, right? And so, while doing that programming, then we continue to we infuse social and emotional learning competencies and the development of those competencies into the programming, right? So that way, students were able to access things around conflict resolution, right, and all these really key skills. As an effort, we strive to be holistic and essentially offer a suite of wraparound services. Again, no issue with operates in isolation, right? And so we work with this cohort, with our cohorts, we work around on issues of mental wellness, safety at large, access, poverty, and things of that nature. And we give the students the cameras. So that's the biggest piece, right? So that they can continue to use those cameras, they can continue on their craft. After the film camp, we provide them with continuous workshops and opportunities to grow. And so our orientation, as an effort, is one that is preventative and functions on this belief that it's asset driven. Our students, our young people, they have so much to offer the world. They are offering so much in the world. You hear that? Giselle was speaking, I was like snapping in my head because I'm like, these young people, they fired up in a way that my generation wasn't. It's just an issue of like conditions are actually so drastically different right now. And so it's really up to us to provide them with the resources and opportunities so that they can thrive, right? So that they can succeed, so that they don't have to go to this alternative that is essentially inflicting harm in community, but actually building community. So that's where we address this issue.
So y'all see where I'm doing with this, right? With the three of y'all, there's definitely room for collaboration between all of you guys. The students, and Students Demand Action can be reaching out to Kevin, and the victims, who have had issues and stuff in their community, Melanie, can be reaching out to Kevin as well, or Kevin may have connections in other areas that he can set them up with. So I'm always putting together the pieces. Which is good.
Yeah, we see that.
Yeah, putting the pieces in place, you know how we do it. But so one of the other questions I wanted to ask you guys before, because we're running, we're going to probably take this to about 8 o'clock. I wanted to kind of see, in an ideal world, if all conditions were met, in your opinion, what would gun regulation look like for you in the community, both for legal and illegal gun holding? I know that's a crazy question to ask, but I feel like if we put it out into the universe, what it would look like, there's a possibility that we can actually make it happen. You know what I mean? Like we can put things in place to actually make these things happen. So I wanted to kind of see what that would look like for you guys in an ideal world with all conditions met, gun regulation across the board. And education, because I think education around guns is important as well. I know it's a hard question to answer. You could take pieces of it too if you want. If you've only got a section of the answer, that's fine, so on and so forth. But I would say, in my opinion, I'll start, right? So in an ideal world, I would say that obviously the large scale guns, AR-15s and assault rifles and things like that, would be gone. We get rid of the access for everyday regular people to have those kinds of weapons because there is just no need. So removal of those, better education in the school system about gun safety, because I think there are a lot of accidental deaths happening from the amount of guns that are just out and about. Like there are kids that are getting hold of guns. There are guns in the home that, aren't unloaded and are just in plain view or not hidden well enough for kids to not get to them. So better education around gun safety and things like that. There would be much more money funded into the community for outreach programs and after school programs that target children in communities that are underserved so that they have places to go, things to do after school when mom and dad may be at work or, maybe working overnights, whatever, but just things to fill the gaps that children tend to fall through and go down that path of destruction. So the resources would be there in the community to grab those students and grab those children and make sure that they have places to go and safe places to be. Better regulation around people owning guns. Like owning a gun should be the same as owning a car. There should be some level of test, some level of competency that you're put through to get the gun in the first place, and so on and so forth. The same way you have to pass a driver's test and take driver's ed to get a car and get behind the wheel, there should be the same thing. And there should also be the same kind of punishments for gun abuse. Like if your gun is not safe in the home or it's discharged accidentally, whatever, there should be the same kind of rules and regulations that there are with driving. You should have to attend courses. You should, lose that license. You should have the gun taken away, things like that. You know what I mean? Like there's far too many people having accidents with guns or having situations with guns that just continue to have guns and nobody says anything about it. And then in terms of, how to handle it on a community level, I just think there needs to be more incentive for people to put the guns down and pick up books and do other things. And whatever that means in terms of, more jobs in the community, whether it's, helping people who are formerly incarcerated get into programs that can help them, reintegrate into society so they don't have to fall back into old habits and things like that. In an ideal world, for me, that's what some of gun regulation would look like. So I probably just took all of y'all's answers, but
well, I'm going to piggyback off of one. I'm going to speak about the community piece that you spoke about and the family piece.
Sure.
I would definitely do something with the youth that are bred in a household where violence is encouraged. Because we cannot forget about those children that live in that household where they watch their uncle, they probably watch their dad, and sometimes even watch their mom, where violence, again, is encouraged. So we need to do something special with those children for them to know that this is not normal behavior and this is not how we should be acting. So, and that's going to take something special as opposed to that good child that, and when I don't want to say anybody's good or bad, but opposed to that child where violence is not encouraged in the home. We have to do something different with those children. And then also the community has to invest in the community. When something happens in our community, we need to hit the community to heal the community. We don't need somebody coming into our community that does not look like us. They're going to come in and then they're going to try to fix this problem and then they're going to leave. Now, everybody knows how Philly is. We know when someone's not being genuine, and we know when you're just here because it's on the news.
Yep.
And because
you
it's
just here so you don't get fined.
Yep. And then you leave. You know what I mean? So the community has to come together to heal the community, but we need to feel safe when we're doing that. So I would put money into the communities, one, to help those children where it just does not seem like there's no way out because violence is the norm in their households, and then put money in the community so we can heal each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm on amen to everything that's been said. I'm just gonna add a couple more things that come to mind. One, we got to get rid of this lobby because this gun lobby is out of control. Like this gun lobby is way out of control. We got to do something to like just get this influence of like you can have these assault. What do you need these assault rifles for? It's crazy. Like these big old guns, like we don't need them. We need to get rid of this lobby that says that needs to be in place. I also, think that we need to really invest in community. Piggybacking off what was said earlier, we really got to make real investments, not like half promised investments, but we got to put money to undo a lot that's been done that's really rooted in these problems. In my perfect world, we would have no guns. Like if my ideal world, like that would not be a thing. Like, cops wouldn't have them. You go to other countries, they are walking around. I come from a culture with, war guns, but we used our hands. Like if we had a conflict at large, ideally you talk it out, ideally. But if you couldn't talk it out, you use your hands and you move on.
That's what I'm talking about. If you lost, you lost. That was it.
Nice. I can't speak to anything else because of that. And so if we could get to a culture where we are, oriented to conflict resolution, and our society can invest in this idea as well of resolving your conflicts, right? Having conversations or duking it out, whatever that is, and then moving on. I think we would do a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, it's going back to Mom's Demand Action. We have BetterHelp. So BetterHelp is an organization where it helps people with, if you need just somebody to talk to. And that's a big thing, is people want other people to talk to. They're frustrated, and they don't want so much somebody to tell them what to do. They just want a listening ear. The other thing is, I would love to see the entertainment world do things differently. I mean, guys want to be rap stars, and and people think that they're like Rambo or whomever. It's got to be a change in there, because that's what'll affect everyone else. I mean, it's like, do programs, do movies where if the dad or the parent has a weapon at home, they're making sure it's locked up so that the child doesn't get it. So in the entertainment, that's educating people in a subtle way, the subliminal seduction type of way. Do things like that. One of the other things with Mom Demand Action that we have is a Survivor Connect, where other survivors get together, and there's mentoring, one-on-one, things like that. But for a world, first of all, I'm a Christian, so when people say that they love God, then you gotta love everybody, because God created everybody. Yep. And with love, there is no violence. There's none.
And I think too, to add to what Kevin said earlier, there are countries out there who have gotten this right. They've gotten it right, and they're living and thriving with it. So I think that we really need to take a hard look at ourselves as a country to say, okay, what's not working, AKA everything, and how do we adopt some of these best practices from other countries that are working? It's okay to take ideas from other countries. Like, I don't know why America feels like, we can only look at what we're doing and that's it. But there are, better ways to do things that may be being, done in other countries that we could really take notes on and really do and improve our lives over here as well, including healthcare. I'm just going to throw that out there. But, I digress. But honestly, there are other countries out there that have gotten this right. And it's honestly not rocket science. We are making it a lot harder than it needs to be. We just need to take a hard look at ourselves and fix what's wrong with, the legislation behind what we're doing, and really start to look at where it's working and how we can implement it here. Kevin, you unmuted.
Yeah, because a lot of thoughts started through my mind as you said that. If a 20th of what happens in this country happened in some of these other countries that you're referencing, Jamie, they would establish the moment as a crisis. It would be a public health crisis. It would be an education crisis, right? And so what does it mean when these other places, when they have one instance of an unfortunate event, will attack with aggression, right? We have to start looking at those models of countries and situations, seeing why, are they responsive in the way that they are and we are not? What have they done to create such conditions to which that is the moment they're responding? And then emulate, right? And then emulate.
Yep. Absolutely. So we're winding down. I appreciate everybody throwing comments in the chat. We're seeing them and we are appreciating them 100%. But before we wind down, I want to give you guys the opportunity to put a call to action out there from either, you know, your organization or from you personally. So we've sat here on this conversation and we've talked about the reasons why gun violence is so prevalent in the country. We've talked about, in an ideal world, what gun legislation and all that would look like, and how we could get to a point where, you know, maybe we can function normally as a country. And then we've talked about, you know, just things that we've experienced and that we've gone through in terms of gun violence. So as a call to action, you know, I'd like each of you to give a call to action to the audience of what the next step should be after this conversation, because talking about it is great, but, you know, sometimes you have to put actions behind your words. So, you know, give everybody your call to action, and then also go ahead and give your contact information where people can connect with you, you know, maybe reach out for help or resources, or maybe be a resource for you. So I don't know who wants to start, but just feel free to jump in.
I'll start. For me, anyone listening, please understand that crime is not the norm. Mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, grandmothers, grandfathers, they are hurting every single day because someone robbed them of their child, of their loved one, and that is not the norm. I'm asking that you take a stand against gun violence. Please remember, the power of one starts with you. I can be reached anytime at 267 808 0350. If you have been a victim of a crime or a co-homicide survivor in the city of Philadelphia and you need help, I will put you in contact with anyone who can help you, with someone who can help you. Again, my number is 267 808 0350. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Giselle, I'll pass it over to you since you're unmuted.
Oh, use your voice. Join the movement. I invite you to join Moms Demand Action. We are nationwide. You will find us in every state and territory. So I ask you to join us. If you can't find your voice, we'll help you. We are a community, and we are a community of not just survivors, but we are a community of game changers. My son, one of his quotes was, "I may not change the world, but I want to inspire many." I want you all to feel inspired. You all can and will make a difference. So I ask you, join Moms Demand Action by texting the word join, JOIN, to 64433. Join the fight. We are winning, and we will continue to press on. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Last but not least, Kevin, you're up. And also, I want to mention that in Philadelphia, my friend Brian, is hosting a holiday fun day and toy drive for children who are victims of gun violence. So I will connect, him with all of you guys, so that if there's any collaboration you guys want to do with that or promotion, that would be great. But, it's always good, especially this time of year, kids dealing with the loss of a loved one. It's Christmas time, and it's any little bit helps to bridge some of that gap for them. So, Kevin, I'm gonna give you the opportunity to give your call to action and your contact as well.
Yes, so I would say that we all have a role to play in this, in combating the issue of gun violence. We all can share resources. We all can share love. We all can build a community. And whatever lane that we're in, we have an opportunity to reach out to someone, to mentor someone, to counsel someone, to love on someone, to provide information about a program to someone, right? Whether it's a young person or whether it's an adult, we all can play a role. And so my call to action for us is to think about the ways in which we can tap into our individual and our collective assets, so that we can build loving and safer communities. I'm a strong believer in this notion that you don't have to wipe away tears, right? If there is no catastrophic event occurring, right? If we take an approach to prevent these measures by building, um, we will have safer and more loving communities. I can be reached on social media myself. My name is Kevin Beckford, Kevin Fitzroy Beckford. Um, the organization to which I represent is the Hustlers Guild. It's at the Hustlers Guild across social media platforms. I welcome the opportunity to engage in conversation, to talk about partnerships, to talk about spreading resources, so that we can really tackle this issue of gun violence head on.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to take a minute to say thank you to all three of you for being on the show today and sharing your wisdom, your words, your stories, and the advocacy that you're doing in the community. I really, really appreciate it. This was a really, really great conversation. Me personally, I will give my call to action as well, and then I will close. But let me just go here. So, ladies and gentlemen, gun violence is an issue in America, as you can all tell. If you've been living under a rock and you're not aware, go and look at any news article from the last 10 years, and you will be astonished at how much gun violence you see. So my call to action for everybody tonight is to vote and to be informed and to know what's going on. And once you do vote, it doesn't end there. You need to make calls to your legislators. You need to make sure that you're holding these folks accountable that we're putting in office, because they can't just say one thing to us and then spend their time in the office doing the other. You need to make sure that if somebody has a policy or a platform that you believe in and that you stand behind, make sure that they're holding to what they said to you, and make sure that if they're not, that you're talking about it. So make sure that you go vote, please, especially in our community. We need to make sure that our voices are heard. We are way too complacent with just saying our vote doesn't count and our vote doesn't matter, and it absolutely does now more than ever. So please make sure that you're an informed voter. Go out there and cast your vote. Make sure that if you are able, you connect with any of the organizations that were on this evening, but just any organization in your community, and be a resource and help people. And I think that once we start as a people taking on and taking ownership of the problem, we can start to grab it head on and start making some progress with it. I think when we turn a blind eye and we say somebody else will do it, it never happens. So until we start to pick up the mantle and run with it ourselves, that's the only way we're going to make change. So just get involved, pay attention, share content that you see that can help somebody, be a resource to help somebody, and please just put the guns down. At the end of the day, just put down the guns. So if you want to reach me, of course, you know, you can reach WJMS Media on all your favorite social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and TikTok. If you want to follow me personally, I am Jams on most platforms. Facebook, it's Jamie Jam. Snapchat, oh snap, it's Jams. Instagram is Just Jams. And TikTok is It's Just Jams. So make sure you check me out. I am constantly doing things, always representing the media company, but also, you know, lung cancer and other important initiatives in the community. So please connect on whatever level you feel comfortable. I welcome any opportunities to collaborate on projects and things like that. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, for giving us your attention, and for honestly taking these calls to action seriously. Everything that they said tonight is meaningful and it's poignant, and I hope that you take something away from it and that you make it mean something in your life. So for everybody that tuned in this evening, thank you so much. If you missed any part of this broadcast, it will live forever on our Facebook and YouTube pages. So just feel free to come back in a few minutes and the replay will be available. This podcast will be available on Tuesday of next week on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. So if you want to listen on the go, you're more than welcome. And again, I just want to thank everybody for being here this evening. We'll see you next time right here on WJMS Media.